Octavius cocked his head to one side, then lifted his snout. His pink tongue flicked out, but not at me. He looked around wildly, then he hissed. The primal sound raised the hair on the back of my neck. Instinctively, I moved closer to her. Gravel skittered against stone behind us. Something big moved around the corner. It was long and slender, with scales and gray-brown coloring of a desert dweller, a dragon. It moved with a predator's grace. I hadn't made this particular one, but I knew the Guardian instantly. That was marketing's name for the first dragon ever designed, the one that hunted feral hogs. Another Guardian followed behind the first one. It had slightly darker coloring, but was just as wild. They bared their teeth as they approached. Octavius hissed again. "Hold on to him," I whispered to Summer. Octavius was fierce for his size, but I had no illusions about how he'd fare against one Guardian, let alone two. His siblings wheeled overhead, chirping and hissing. I hoped they wouldn't attack unless Octavius did. They usually followed his lead, but they were visibly disturbed. The two Guardians ignored them. They split up and made a circle around us, tasting the air all the while. I pressed myself close against Summer and tried to keep an eye on both of them. "What are they?" she asked. "The first prototype, the hog hunters." Thank God Riker stayed home. "Dangerous?" "Very." A shrill whistle sounded from somewhere. The Guardians gave us one last unblinking stare before melting away into the scree. "Thank God," I whispered. I knew what this was now. "Who whistled?" Summer still clung to Octavius's legs. He'd given up trying to escape and now chirped at his siblings, probably telling them to watch where the Guardians went. "Someone who knows how to make an entrance." She was surprised when Simon Redwood stumped around the corner. If possible, he'd become even more of a legend after his recent death in the fire that consumed his home. Summer and I had watched a 2-hour special on him and all of his wild inventions and startups, most of which, admittedly, never really found success. Build-A-Dragon was the one that finally hit big, but he'd lost it to Robert Greaves. I imagined that Evelyn would welcome him back, but he'd assured me at our last meeting that death suited him. "Hey, kids," he called. He wore dungarees and worn hiking boots. He scrambled toward us with a spryness that belied his age. On a guy with a shock of white hair, it was downright uncanny. "Sorry to show up unannounced." "Ghosts tend to do that, Mr. Redwood," I said, grinning in spite of the shock. Simon Redwood had been a hero of mine for as long as I could remember. The same went for Summer, who stared at him with a starry-eyed expression. Is that how I looked? Probably so.